Hello, this is Harold Lapidus, and welcome to the Boston Herald podcast. My special guest today is Michael Simmons of Mojo magazine, among many other accomplishments. He's written the liner notes for Bob Dylan Bootleg Series number 10, another self-portrait, and Michael Bloomfield box set, and Kinky Friedman, and all sorts of things. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Harold.
How you doing?
I'm good, man. Good.
I've in this whole pandemic thing.
Well, I have several stock answers. One of them is that as an old acid head, I know that all trips end eventually one way or another.
That's I guess appropriate for this for this conversation. So you write for Mojo magazine. Do you want to? One of the reasons we're doing this little podcast today is because you have the review of the new Bob Dylan album in the new issue.
Right. I wrote the feature review of Rough and Rowdy Ways for the August issue, which just hit the stands, if there is such a thing as newsstands anymore, in England, and it should reach the U.S. in about a week or two.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Do you know who's on the cover?
I think Paul Weller.
Yeah, I think I've seen it.
That's the UK cover. Sometimes they put different artists for the US cover. I don't know what they have planned. I don't know if anyone in the US knows who Paul Weller is.
Well, of a certain age.
Right.
So, like me, you like the new Bob Dylan album. Surprise, surprise. Do you did you hear the singles first and then hear the album, or were we able to hear the whole album in its entirety before?
No, I heard the singles first, like most Dylan fans.
So when for instance when Murder Most Foul dropped, as they say, the kids say, what were your thoughts, and when did you even have any advance notice?
No, I did not. And at first I wasn't crazy about Murder Most Foul. I loved I Contain Multitudes when that dropped, and I loved, what was the third one?
False Prophet.
False Prophet I loved. I grew to love Murder Most Foul as well. And then when I got the album, I was just, as the Brits say, gobsmacked. I was knocked out. I like virtually all of Dylan's studio albums since Time Out of Mind.
And even before.
Those two. But, I wasn't crazy about the Christmas album. But that doesn't count. I mean, of original material.
Right.
And I like the Sinatra albums, or the standards albums, whatever you want to call them. But all the original material albums, including Together Through Life, by the way, which I think is underrated. I think he's been delivering steadily original material since 1998, after a kind of a lull for a bit.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that you think about this period. It's almost a quarter of a century, and it seemed like it's still all this new stuff. Ever since like Time Out of Mind forward, it just seems like his new stuff, and it's already almost 25 years since he's put it all out.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the times, like, I remember when I saw The Last Waltz, I thought those guys are getting old. now it's like, how much longer are these guys going to be around? And of course, some of those guys are no longer around, but Bob's still out there, needless to say, and fiddles.
Heading for another joint.
What was that?
Heading for another joint.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully. Some of the stuff I think live is going to really, if he gets to tour again, it's going to be pretty. A lot of stuff's ready for the stage. It'd be pretty dramatic, I think.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much you know, or I know you're not a fan of a lot of social media, but Blake Mills, without saying a word, just played instrumental versions of a whole album just him playing guitar, almost like as an indication of how involved he was. And then it was taken down for a few days, and then it was put back up. So, but I was wondering how much you knew about who did what on the album, if you indeed do know. Because I know Ben Montench is listed. There's, Fiona Apple. These people are listed as.
Yeah, sorry.
Good.
I would guess that the piano on Murder Most Foul is not Dylan.
Yes.
And I think there's 2 pianos, but I'm not sure. What do you think? You think there's 2 pianos on Murder Most Foul?
It could very well be, yes.
I had harmonium in the beginning too. It might or might not be Fiona Apple, says the scuttlebutt.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I guess Ben Montench.
I heard the same rumors you do, by the way. I don't know. I read Expecting Rain. I don't know. People say things.
And one of the, first of all, it just seems like it reminds me more of, I guess if it reminds me of anything, it does remind me of Time Out of Mind, because it just seems like a whole new step forward while also like a summary of everything in the past.
It's, I never presume to know what the hell Bob Dylan is thinking. And it's
good move.
It's a chump's game. It really is.
Yeah.
It's usually wrong, or even if you're right, he'll deny it. So it really doesn't matter. But as a fellow Dylanologist, it's fun to speculate about these things. This is, in my opinion, the most autobiographical album he's ever made, or most overtly autobiographical album he's ever made. It's almost a concept album in some ways. And there's certainly themes that continue throughout, several songs.
Yeah, I noticed one thing, and it could be, I think he mentions Down in the Boondocks twice, does he? I'm not even sure. And I can edit that out if I'm wrong. But I was listening in the car today. It just seemed like in a couple of songs he mentions Down in the Boondock, and which is a great
song, by the way. Always love that song.
That's Joe South, right? Or
Joe South wrote it. Billy Joe Royal had the hit on it.
Had the hit with it, yeah. And of course, as all us people like us know, Joe South played on Blonde on Blonde. Got to throw that in there. And there was the Julius Caesar. The Rubicon was Julius Caesar, Not Looking Back, and he mentioned it in whatever the third song is. My Own Version of You, I think he does. And again, in my review, he mentions the Holy Grail in one song, and then lopping off someone's arm in another. And I just wondered if that was a Monty Python reference. And it could, just be, not at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. So what makes you think it's what makes you think it's autobiographical or
I made some notes here. May I consult my notes?
Yes.
The whole "I Contain Multitudes" concept is not only expressed in that song, it's also expressed in Murder Most Foul. The album is almost bookended by multitude concepts. And then, as you point out, Julius Caesar's mentioned in Crossing the Rubicon, because, of course, that line came from Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, I believe. I played Mark Antony, by the way, in 6th grade.
It came in handy.
I did the whole Friends, Romans, and Countrymen.
That was you? Awesome.
That was me. Yeah.
Well, actually,
Brando, yeah, who was also mentioned in Bob's new album. And as is Terry Malloy, who Brando played in On the Waterfront. There's so many references in this album. It's like Dylan went through his library and his DVD collection and his memory and conjured up all these names and great talents and signatures.
It's like he sprinkles little Dylan dust over everything, and just over people like us trying to figure it all out more than he did probably, and some of them. Now, one of the I mean, I agree with you that it's autobiographical, or at least auto-mythographical, or something. He's adding to his own myth, or admitting or confirming his own creation that that Bobby Zimmerman created back in 1960 or whatever. I found it a little disconcerting at first that he was so seemingly straightforward, but then again, I was when I started reading Chronicles, I thought, wow, I can't believe he's revealing all these truths, and and that had a lot of mythological things in it as well. But it does seem like he's playing into his own myths.
I don't, this whole thing about Dylan being a mysterious, unreadable character. I've never thought he was that mysterious. I don't think he's just a brilliant guy, obviously. I mean, as far as American singer-songwriters of the last 60 years, there's nobody more brilliant. And so he's, he confounds people because they don't know how to relate to that, because nobody's as smart as he is or as talented as he is. But I don't think he's that mysterious.
Yeah, I mean, he
puts things together that nobody else does. And I mean, as I said in the Mojo review, at the end, he contains, he talks about multitudes that nobody else thought of mentioning. He puts things together like nobody else does. People don't have the vision or the balls or the guts to do what Dylan does. And he breaks rules constantly. And most people are rule followers, not rule breakers. He's about, in terms of popular music, he's maybe the biggest rule breaker there is. In terms of someone being as commercially successful and as artistically successful simultaneously.
Yeah, it's interesting when you hear, I believe it was the Forest Hills 65 show, when he's playing like Desolation Row, and people are laughing, and there's a lot of humor in the song. But after the motorcycle accident, no one's laughing anymore. Everyone's just analyzing and taking everything very seriously. And he's incredibly funny.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just a lot of the humor is just very dry, or in this case, I mean, a lot of it's morbid on the new album, but it is still a lot of humor in there. I think that's his secret weapon.
Well, Dylan's obviously a very funny guy. Even his early stuff, I Shall Be Free and things like that, he was always funny. He's also got kind of a gallows humor, which I adore. In the album I mentioned earlier, Together Through Life, which I think is underrated, My Wife's Hometown, and it's all good. For instance, the song, It's All Good, is hysterically funny to me, because it's not all good. It's incredible when you think about, the things Dylan said, like everything is broken, it's all good. He has called out the fact that things are not, that something's rotten in Denmark. To bring up another Hamlet reference. He's always been, saying, watch where you're walking, everyone. It's dangerous out there. Of course, nobody listens to him, but what the hell? I mean, they listen to him musically, they listen to his songs, but, they cross the Rubicon anyway.
Now, one of the controversies about the album is that False Prophet is obviously based on the arrangement of Billy the Kid Emerson.
Which everyone on the whole planet has in their record collection.
I do now. I downloaded it right afterwards when I
saw everybody has books, by Henry Timrod.
That's right. No, just Scott Warmoth has all these books, and he has everything imaginable in every record. I like when
Scott has access to Google.
Well, it doesn't answer the paintings. How does he figure out where the paintings come from that he makes that are?
I asked Scott that once, and he wouldn't.
You wouldn't give it up.
You might want to explain who Scott Warmoth is.
Oh yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Scott Warmoth is one of the great Dylan sleuths. I got to meet him in Tulsa at the symposium, and he just figures out where things come from in ways that are just mind-boggling. One thing that he did was that he figured out the CD that had a compilation of songs where he was inspired to find some lines, but it was a bunch of songs all on one CD. And that's pretty impressive.
Really? What CD is that?
And it was like a blues compilation or something. This is a while back, but I just, because Michael Gray was questioning him, was like, what do you mean? And it's like, it's all on one CD. Anyway, we're getting a little bit down the rabbit hole here, but
okay. Which tends to happen when discussing Bob Dylan. But anyway, go ahead.
That's part of the fun part. Let's backtrack a little. So how did you even get into Dylan to begin with?
Well, I was a Beatles fan from the time I saw them before Ed Sullivan. I saw them on the Jack Parr show.
Oh. Is there any proof?
Well, that they were on the Jack Parr show, yes.
Yes.
They weren't actually on it. It was film clips from England.
Right.
But then, the night in February of '64 when they were on the Ed Sullivan show, I, like every other American kid, was watching, and it changed my life. And I began reading a magazine called Hit Parader, which at the time was the hippest music magazine. And they covered, not only did they cover rock, but they covered rhythm and blues or soul, country music. So that's where I first heard about Johnny Cash, and folk music. And I started reading about Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. And when I turned 10, I got a guitar for my 10th birthday, 1965. And we went to a music store, and I was learning chords. So my father offered to buy 2 books of chords, and I got 101 folk songs and the song folio for Bringing It All Back Home.
Oh, really?
I had not heard the album yet.
Uh-huh.
Which is before Like a Rolling Stone came out. So I had not heard the album. I'm not even sure. I had heard Dylan because I used to listen to a radio show hosted by Oscar Brand on NYU. It was called like Folk Song USA or something like that. And I'd heard Dylan on that. And so the first time I was introduced to the Bringing It All Back Home songs, I didn't even know what the melodies were. But I learned the chords, and I sort of made up melodies. And the funniest thing is that they were pretty close to the actual melodies. About a month after having the song folio, I begged my father to buy me the actual album. So the first album, Dylan album that I owned, was Bringing It All Back Home in 1965. Not long after it came out, I was 10 years old, and I was hooked. And then that summer, we were in a diner, and for a nickel, you could get 5 songs. In diners in those days, you might remember this, every table had its own little jukebox. And you would flip through the jukebox and see what songs you wanted. And there was a song called Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan. And I just automatically figured, and my friend Larry Ratzo-Sullivan had the same experience, I thought it was about the Rolling Stones. I didn't know what it meant, like a Rolling Stone. Right. Anyway, so I played the song, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell is this? And as I've written, it was like, it felt like freedom. It opened up, it kicked open doors everywhere. It was like taking acid for the first time or something like that. I mean, it was really, or seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I mean, it was that life-changing for a lot of reasons. And, I'm sitting here 55 years later, I'm 65 years old now, and I'm still talking about Bob Dylan. So,
and bring it all back home.
Exactly.
And when's the first time you saw him? That's Highway 60. And when's the first time you saw him?
Nassau Coliseum, January '74 with the band.
Was it the first night? Do you remember, was the first night or the second night? Because I was at the second.
I have a ticket stub somewhere, but I don't remember.
Because we might have been.
I did actually, the whole what?
I was going to say that I actually saw you at Paul's Mall in 1977 at that National Lampoon thing, and you were the band or the opening act or something.
You saw me there?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this once before, many years ago. Yeah, and I didn't know who you were, and then, and but we talked about because that was the first thing when I came to college and to go to college in September '77, and the first thing I saw went to Paul's Mall, and it was a National Lampoon review, and there you were.
We were the opening act, yeah.
Yeah.
And the band for the actors. Yeah. And we spoke that night?
No. No, we spoke about the fact that when I realized there was a connection with you, that I asked you if you knew who played, and you said, yeah, I did. So that was already, you were waiting like 10 years to see Bob Dylan at that point.
Well, by '66, he had the so-called mysterious, alleged motorcycle accident. And for 8 years, he, as you know, I don't have to tell you, and probably everyone who's listening to this, watching this podcast, or whatever it is, that except for a handful of appearances, the Woody Guthrie tribute at Carnegie Hall, I think he appeared with the bands at some festival in Canada, I think. You know what I missed? And I guess it was 71 or 72. I don't remember. It was December 71. I mean, I've written about it a million times. I've even told Robbie this story. I had tickets to see the band on New Year's Eve at the Academy of Music. And it was me and 3 friends of mine. We scored tickets for New Year's Eve because they were there for a few nights, but we got the New Year's Eve tickets. And we talked about it before. Bob's going to show up. It's New Year's Eve. It's going to be a special night. It's the band. Bob's going to show up. So I had the ticket. About 2 weeks before the show, my father walks into my room and says, guess what? We're going to Miami. I said, no. You're going to Miami. I'm going to the Academy of Music to see the band.
Yeah.
And hopefully Bob Dylan. He said, no. Well, I was 16 or whatever I was. So he won. So I went to Miami, and there was no internet or anything.
Right.
And so I didn't know. So I had to wait till I got back home to find out. And first thing I did when I got home was call up my friend Larry Chertoff, and I said, so? And he went, he showed. And I went, I mean, he had appeared publicly 3 times in that 8-year stretch. That was one of them. I could have seen him. I had the ticket. And I sat in Miami with a bunch of fat Jews slathered up in grease instead of seeing my favorite Jew at the Academy of Music.
And you're Jewish?
Yes, I am Jewish.
Yes, we want to clarify that before things get taken out of context and go viral in ways that you'll never see. So you're also a big fan of Michael Bloomfield, who did the liner notes for the box set, From the Head to the Hand from the Heart. What is it? From the head to from the heart to the.
Oh, it's right over there. Here, hold on 1 second. No, that's not. That's another Jew. There's another one of my favorite Jews, Michael Bloomfield. This is the box set. From his head to his heart to his hands.
Yeah. And so you're a big fan, obviously. You wrote the liner notes. You're pretty close with Al Kooper, who was Mike Bloomfield's partner in crime in many ways. And I assume your introduction was through Highway 61, or did you know about him beforehand?
I didn't know that. I don't know that I don't recall remembering at first that Bloomfield had played on Highway 61. I may have known it. my first realization of hearing this thrilling guitar player was my friend Ed Zuckerman and I were hanging at his house, and we were 10. Same year I got Bringing It All Back Home. And his brother Sam was 16. And his brother Sam was into all the harder edged R&B, white R&B bands like the Animals and the Stones and the Yardbirds and Them with Van Morrison. And so Sam was knocking the Liverpool bands because we were into, the Beatles, and Ed and I used to do the Freddie. I don't know. Some of your younger viewers may not even know what that is. Freddie.
Yeah, too bad we didn't have cell phones in those days.
Exactly. Anyway, so he said, well, if you forget about that Liverpool crap, that teeny bopper stuff. He said you should get into the Stones and Yardbirds, etc. I said, I love the Stones. What are you talking about? He said, well, if you love the Stones, you really love these guys. And he showed me an album cover, the very first album by Paul Butterfield, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And he played me some of it, and I heard this guitar player, and it was, I had just started, as they said, playing guitar that year. I'd never heard guitar playing like that. Except, I guess I'd heard it on Highway 61 and didn't realize who it was. But that first Butterfield album changed, another album that changed my life.
And how'd you get to know Al Kooper?
How did I get to know Al Kooper?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is I first met him in 1977 or 78. My band Slewfoot, Michael Simmons and Slewfoot, were playing LA. And I went to a restaurant/bar called the Rainbow Bar and Grill, where all the musicians hung out on Sunset Boulevard. We were playing next door at a place called the Roxy. And we went to have dinner at the Rainbow, and I knew this friends of my parents, their daughter had allegedly gone out with Al. So I'm sitting there at the Rainbow, and I see Al sitting there across the room, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity. So I walk up to him and I go, hi, Al, I'm a friend of, and I mentioned the girl's name. And he said, never heard of her. And he really didn't want to talk to me. He was with his friends. And I obviously was just some, 22-year-old, 23-year-old fan. And he wanted me to be gone, and which I quickly made myself gone. And then years later, when I became a music writer as my regular gig, I just started interviewing him for various articles, a lot of them Dylan related. And we became closer and closer, and we have similar senses of humor, and we're both New York Jews, and we share that gallows humor that I think Jews share. And I think you know what I'm talking about, Harold.
Which leads us back to Bob Dylan.
Right. Third base. And exactly. And then we just became pals. And so then Al says to me, calls me up and says, I'm finally going to pull off this Bloomfield box set. You want to write the liners? I said, yes, I do. Thank you.
And how did you start getting into writing to begin with, writing about music?
Well, I've been writing since I was a kid. I started an underground newspaper when I was 15 called Paper Tiger.
Paper Tiger.
It was a satire of communist China used to call the United States a paper tiger. So it was a play on that. And I wrote about music in that. I was the editor, or one of the editors. And then later in the 70s, while I was a working musician, I also wrote for Country Music magazine, which was the biggest country magazine at the time. And then I didn't write about music much for the next 20 or so years. I started writing for the LA Weekly in the 90s. And as a news reporter, investigative journalist, I reviewed plays. I'm fond of saying, I wrote about everything except I never did a restaurant review. much to my consternation. I would have loved the free meals, but never got those. But I started writing about music for them, and that's so mid '90s. I started writing music stuff.
Um,
And interviewed Al in there somewhere.
And you visited. He lives outside of Boston. You visited him here, haven't you?
Several times, yeah.
I don't want this to be too much of a name dropping thing, but you were able to help me connect with Kinky Friedman and Tom Russell and people like that. Kinky in particular is quite a character.
Put it mildly. And that's a compliment.
Yes. And I think he even did liner notes for one of his albums as well.
Did.
And Girl from the North Country, I think. Was that, or was that the thing you did? Or
no, that was the songs. I can't remember the exact title of the album, but the second set of Dylan liners I wrote was for a compilation of Dylan's versions of the songs that were in the play, in the musical Girl from the North Country. That's something else. The Kinky album that I wrote lines for, I don't remember the name of.
One before Circle of Life, right? The Loneliest Man I Knew, maybe?
Loneliest Man I Know, yeah.
Yeah, so listeners and viewers, Michael has quite a extensive history of writing about cool people in music. And
I also, the other liners that I'm proud of is I wrote liners for a collection of Kristofferson's early demos called, the name of the album was Please Don't Tell Me How the Story Ends. And I think it was 30,000 words or something like that. It was incredibly long liner notes. It took me months. They had to hold up the release, the album's release, because I was running so late. Actually, that happened with the Bloomfield album too. But thankfully, Al was running late doing what he had to do, so I wasn't alone.
And and right now, are you allowed to talk about what you're writing about now? I'm interrupting you from writing about something.
I'm writing about Miles Davis.
And
Mojo.
Is it about him or an album review, or?
It's about it's a feature. It's about a period in his life starts around 1975, 74, 75. It goes into his period of seclusion. He had one like Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out of it around 80, 81. So it covers that period.
Is that when he went to Warner Brothers, that era?
He went to Warner Brothers afterwards, yeah.
Yeah.
After he came out of seclusion.
Is there anything else going on that you would like to promote? We have the new issue of Mojo with probably Paul Weller on the cover. That is out around now. It may or may not be in a store, if there are indeed stores to buy them. There is even difficult to find stores for the pandemic, but I mean, there are, if you go to like Barnes and Noble and stuff, you can find it. They always have Mojo, and that's where I pick up my copies. And anything else we should be on the lookout for?
There's a couple of things I'm working on that I can't talk about. A book in particular, but it's too early to discuss it. I don't mean to be coy, but I don't have a deal yet, so I can't talk about it.
Well, we'll have you back on when that. I said we'll have you back on when that happens.
Actually, it's not about Dylan, but there is a Dylan connection to my secret project. But I'll tell you about that once the book is published.
Maybe you'll tell me about it once the camera is off. I don't know. I can keep a secret.
I'll have to kill you. If you talk about it.
That's our inside joke. We keep secrets from I'll tell you, but don't tell anybody else. All right. Well, everyone, and you said that the Mojo should be out next week in the UK. Is that what you're saying?
No, it was out last week.
Oh, last week.
Weeks ago in the UK. It should be out in a week or two in the US. Meaning, I hear from people I know who subscribe to Mojo that it's delayed. The issues are coming delayed because of the effect that COVID's having on the mail postal systems.
Mm-hmm.
So US subscribers should get their Mojos in hopefully 2-3 weeks, maybe a month. I don't know. We'll see.
I have to say, get their Mojos working. I have to.
No, we've never used that joke.
No, I'll bet.
How
about Mr.
original.
Mojo Horizon? You use that one either? No. All right. Well, thank you, Michael, for being on this podcast. Everyone go out and buy or find Mojo where as best they can. And if you have back issues and you haven't noticed Michael's name before, be on the lookout for them. And you know, if you haven't got the Bloomfield box set or the another self-portrait box set, you know, then go out and get it. And,
Thank you.
all right. Thanks. Take care. Be healthy. Be safe.
You too, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.